the Eddie-torial podcast.
They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
On Sunday, LeBron James went to watch his son's game in California, and during the national anthem, he sat down, apparently in protest, but clearly just in disrespect for this nation, this country, and the freedoms that we enjoy. This is infuriating to me and to many others. And in my opinion, if LeBron James doesn't like this country, then he can go to China. He can go to some other country that he is constantly becoming a shill for and trying to defend the Chinese Communist Party. And you could understand why, because they get paid pennies on the dollar to make these shoes that LeBron James is making millions and millions and millions of dollars from. And so the NBA has been silent, and LeBron James has a spokesperson for the NBA that everybody's paying attention to. When he sits down during the national anthem and defends the Chinese Communist Party, I've got a problem with that. And not only me, but also this UFC fighter, Colby Covington, just goes on a rant against LeBron James. And here he is there. And hopefully you can see my screen. He goes on a rant and calling him a spineless coward. And I would have to agree. He's a spineless coward for not standing up to the abuse and the human rights violations that are happening from the Communist Chinese Party and the shills in the American political institutions that are standing up and defending and whitewashing everything that the Chinese Communist Party is doing here in the United States. And it also brings me to this. If people do not like this country, you are free to leave. There is no other country that has the freedoms that we do, and the liberties that we do, and the prosperity that comes along with the blessings that God has given us here in the United States. So I thought this was interesting. In my country, and I'm just reading it for you here, in my country, I'm forced to keep my mouth shut. But here I am free to talk trash about this country in hopes that I can soon change it into a country where I am forced to keep my mouth shut. This is so true, and this is what happens with Palestinians, queers for Palestine, and other groups like that. There's a cognitive dissonance that is shocking, that it's the freedom that allows them to speak and trash a country, and they want this country to become like their country, which would bring in Sharia law, and we would lose all of our freedoms, the freedoms that people like this, that women and homosexuals have in the United States that they wouldn't have in these other countries.
Because of his integrity and his work ethic, and if he tells you he's going to do something, he's going to do his very best to follow through with that, no matter what that is. So Eddie and I met in or about kindergarten, and we grew up together all the way through college pretty much. And we played football against each other in middle school. We wrestled together throughout high school and into college. Wrestling is probably one of the toughest sports there is. He'd be wrestling some total studs, and you'd look at Eddie. I mean, we nicknamed him the Snake. He'd get out of anything, and he just you'd look at Eddie. Here's this freckle-faced kid headed out to the mat, not really built, and there'd be a monster coming out there, and he didn't hesitate for a moment. I remember a time in college when there was actually a frat party, and Eddie was at the party, and somebody had started a fight with all these frat boys, and there was about 4 wrestlers in a whole house full of frat boys, and they took them all on, and by the end of the fight, there was just 4 wrestlers standing. So they took them all out, and I remember that really well. Eddie's a very loyal person, and if he tells you he's going to do something, he's going to do it. He's going to follow through with whatever he tells you he's going to do. You can trust him, and he's the kind of person with the type of integrity that he's not going to be swayed. He's gonna represent people that elect him and put him into office, and he's gonna do a great job.
All right. Well, we're here and we're going to talk about medical freedom. And with me is Travis Prater. And so thank you for everything that you've done, including just speaking up and not sitting back. And I'd love to hear your story. So let's just start with your story. What got you into the situation where you're now on a podcast? How'd you end up here?
That's a great question. I worked in an urgent care during COVID when COVID pandemic began.
Yeah.
And so I was really basically on the front lines of everyone coming in who was sick. None of the doctor's offices would see sick patients, so they were all instructed to come to the urgent care. I just happened to work at the busiest urgent care in town.
And which town was that?
In Venice.
In Venice, okay.
And it took me about a year to really research and feel comfortable with some of the treatment options for COVID. And after about a year, we did start treating, two of us in our urgent care started treating COVID with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And we were having very good success. We had patients sending pizza and Starbucks gift cards and flowers and thank you for saving my mom's life. Thank you for saving my life. And in the fall of that year, in 2021, we were told to basically to cease and desist, that we would not be allowed to prescribe those medications any longer for people who are sick, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of having a stack of research that we had done, in spite of medical support.
Yeah, a lot of medical support and,
Yes.
and a lot of research. And I read and watched a lot of that research myself. But you were frontline. So how did you,
Yes.
you said with a lot of success, how would you define that success?
Well, people didn't die.
Okay, that's a thumbs up.
We sent people to the hospital for Regeneron, for the monoclonal antibodies, and then subsequently to some of the area pop-up treatment areas that also were doing that. So we did utilize that portion of the treatment. But for the most part, I've had no deaths in my treatment patients. I've treated well over 3,000 patients for COVID by now. And I've not known of any deaths of patients that I've treated with these medications. They are some of the best tolerated medications I could prescribe, and they're safe. They're available over the counter in 69
Yeah.
in 69 countries. So people there get to decide what they take it for, how long they take it, and what dose, because it is that safe.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, we saw a lot of that here, and as a matter of fact, it was was it over the counter here? Let me ask.
No.
Because when I believe that when people would go overseas, was it ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine? It was one of those that I believe that people were prescribed as far as going overseas. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So oftentimes when people travel, hydroxychloroquine is utilized as an anti-malarial, and it's used as preventatively. So people are prescribed the medication as a prevention for malaria if you travel to endemic areas.
And that was for how many years has
done
that been the standard?
Decades.
Prophylactic.
Decades.
Decades.
Yes.
Because I remember looking at this as my daughter went on a missionary trip to Uganda, and
Yes.
I'm like, that looks familiar. And
Yes.
come to find out, yep, it is familiar.
Correct. Correct.
I wish I didn't have to consume my mind with all this knowledge, but I'm grateful that people like you and Dr. Badiari, is that how you pronounce his name?
Bhattacharya.
Bhattacharya, thank you, and others
Mhm.
have stepped up and done a tremendous job as far as educating lay people such as myself into what's happening. So tell me more about them coming back and telling you that you couldn't prescribe this medicine anymore.
Yes, basically it was a mid-level management person who instructed me that I could not prescribe them. She could not pronounce the name of the medications, and basically knew nothing about them, but this was handed down basically from corporate because I did work for a large corporate conglomerate.
Yeah.
And they basically told us that we were the only people in the whole corporation that were prescribing this, in spite of the fact that there were literally millions of prescriptions for ivermectin a day. Someone was prescribing them.
So it's not just that they were pushing down this unresearched directive and this unvetted directive, but they were even lying about doing it.
Correct. They were very dishonest.
I'd like to say shocking, but it's not shocking anymore. So what happened to you in this process? What did you do?
So basically, because I would not stop prescribing, they took me off the schedule and told me that I could not come to work. And so I resigned at that point, because I'm not going to have a job in which I don't go to work. So
Yeah.
So I went ahead and resigned and opened my own practice. And my husband had opened his own practice as a counselor before me, and so knew how to get a website going, get an LLC. And so he was very instrumental in helping me get my business, the part that medical people don't know,
Yeah.
getting that established so that I could do my part. And COVID was a great advertiser for me. Oh, hey, how did you get treatment? Who treated you? And so my name got around town very quickly so that people could find me and get treatment. And
Yeah.
that's how I ended up opening my own practice.
And that's how my wife found you, is through a mutual friend.
Yes, word of mouth.
Word of mouth. Exactly. So you've got, is it thriving? How's the business?
Absolutely.
And are people, is the government pushing against what you're doing? Are you receiving any kind of friction from
Not
any
yet.
authorities?
Not yet, anyway.
We are in the free state of Florida.
We are in the free state of Florida, and I thank God
Yes.
for that every day.
Yes.
We do accept Medicare in our practice. That is the only insurance that we accept. And so we do conduct ourselves in such a way as to be cognizant and to be very, very confident that we are inside of the rules at all times. And just reviewing all of the laws and all of the amendments and everything that sort of guides medical practice, I cannot find anything that we are in violation of. And so I rest my head very well on the pillow at night, and I treat patients according to what is best for them and according to what they prefer as well. So I allow them to be an active part of their medical treatment. And if they prefer non-pharmaceutical or alternative or off-label treatments, that all comes into play, rather than allowing some corporate person who can't pronounce drugs to dictate how I practice medicine.
Yeah. Personally, I took ivermectin as a prophylactic for
I've
COVID.
taken it as well.
And to all the ridicule of so many people who have tried to say that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going to kill myself and other people, and actually on YouTube being censored. Even just last week, I was censored on YouTube for sharing Stephen Kirsch. Had an article, and I was like, wow, that's really good. And he just explained, what was that article that I put out there? He just explained that I think he's into the statistics, and he's just measuring the overall deaths relative pre-COVID and post-COVID, just has a population. And he said these things are spiking. This is ridiculous. And the vaccine is not helping those people. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite.
Yes.
Now I'm going to bring this back to politics because I'm running for office.
Okay.
And did you know that Vern Buchanan voted to not reinstate pilots who refused the vaccine and were fired for refusing the vaccine? And this is just recently. I can't understand it from previous, but there'd be more room for grace if this was done, in 2021. This is done in 2023.
We have plenty of evidence that the vaccine doesn't protect anyone, I'd argue, at all,
Yeah.
but certainly doesn't protect anyone outside of the recipient's body. So to mandate something that doesn't affect anyone outside of your own body it makes no sense. It's completely illogical.
There's a word for it, and I don't mean to pull you into politics here, but it's called tyranny. It's tyrannical.
Exactly.
It is
Yes.
not medical freedom. It is not
Yes.
the policies that should be happening in,
Yes.
thankfully, the free state of Florida. But we need a free country, and we need
Absolutely.
politicians that are going to support freedom
Absolutely.
and not
can I
punish
just
people.
say that to force people to take a drug that is not, at the time, not FDA approved and did not go through the normal FDA approval process. A lot of people don't know this, but any previous vaccines prior to this one required 1, 3, 5, and 7-year data to get approved. And without any of that, it couldn't have been approved through the normal process. We don't know anything about long-term side effects. So if you have, I think we had precisely 1 year of data. That's all. 1.
Yeah.
No 3, no 5, no 7. And this was pushed through. So people like myself who thought, wow, I don't really have enough data to know what this is going to do long term to my body. But yet I know that I am low risk for this, that over 99% of people survive COVID, even with comorbidities. And I don't know what the risk is. So this is an unknown risk for a vaccine to a known risk for an infection. I'll take an infection every day and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, and people should have the right to make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
And the right actually to be able to evaluate the data. And the American people were
Yes.
not allowed to evaluate the data because the FBI and the woke and weaponized government censored social media.
I've never
and
seen anything like
and
it.
it's still censoring information
is.
now.
It
YouTube
is.
is. Twitter,
Yes.
wasn't, but you never know. We are so close to being completely censored right now.
Mhm.
And not only censored, but I still go back to Vern Buchanan's vote to punish pilots who chose not to take the vaccine, who could demonstrably be healthier than those who took the vaccine. And now we need to still punish them
Yes.
because he's supporting the pharmaceuticals and it's a
Yes.
money-making operation.
Yes.
And
That's
he's
all we
supporting,
can deduce.
I should say the pharmaceuticals are supporting him through.
Mhm. I actually have a patient who is a pilot who is unvaccinated and tells me that he has more work opportunities than he could ever hope for
Oh, good.
because of his unvaccinated status, that people are seeking out unvaccinated pilots. You tell me why.
Yeah. Well, we know why.
Yes.
I would myocarditis. Let's just call it
Yes.
like it is. It's myocarditis
Yes.
and other. There was a high spike in people who were sick right immediately after they took the vaccine, and we still, according to Stephen Kirsch's data, and do you know anything about what's happened out in New Zealand?
Yes, I've been following that as well.
I would love to hear your take on the breach of data that happened in New Zealand.
From what I understand, it's supposedly some incomplete data. However, completeness of data doesn't really matter when we're looking at this was what was given, these were the symptoms that occurred afterwards. It doesn't matter that you don't have the data. For example, they had a lot of people that were like, well, this was vaccine number 3 for them.
Yeah.
Well, what happened to vaccine 1 and 2? Well, who cares?
Yeah.
They got them. We know that because this is 3. What do we need documentation of?
Well, it was the best, from what I understand, it was the best record level data that could have been
4
provided.
million records. That was a lot of records. There was a lot of documentation, and there was a lot of detail in the side effects.
And this could be given by any country, but this information is being quashed in all countries, which is a little bit scary if you think about
it really is.
that each of these countries is holding back this record level data that would show that the vaccine is not what it was purported to be, and as a matter of fact appears to be quite worse.
Yes, and if you look at the Israel data, the same thing was done with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what would you like to see, since I'm running for Congress, what would you like to see Congress do with regards to medical freedom?
I think it's very simple. Just support the freedoms and the rights that we supposedly already have. I think the main thing I learned about COVID was that you don't have any right that you are not willing to stand up and fight for. So when everything came down, you know, you have to wear a mask, you have to be 6 feet apart, you have to take a vaccine. Well, no one could really go against that if they didn't fight it. So
That's so good, and I'm not sure if you know what happened here. I think my wife talked to your partner, your business partner, and shared what we did here. But basically, they came because the news came and found out that we weren't in masks, and we had some teachers that were on video. Dare I say, having a good time without a mask. And I'm looking at you, Mr. K. And so then the media came. There was helicopters flying by. It was the center of attention, and all this intense pressure and bullying through that pressure of the media. And then on top of that, then code enforcement came and said, you will enforce a mask mandate, and we will be here to verify on the next day. So we had to send a letter to code enforcement, and I went ahead and CC'd all the county commissioners and said, we will not participate and be a part of what we see as a lie and as an excuse to remove the religious, economic, and individual liberties that we have. And then we cited all this data because we've been researching this.
Yes.
There was Canadian data. There was the Stanford professors' data. There was a lot of people who had looked at all this, and mask mandates were not healthy for kids, not healthy at all. No matter how much they tried to piece this together to say it's for the public good, it was not for the public good. And now Vern Buchanan, 3 years later, says, well, it wasn't good. No, we need somebody in Congress that understands the Constitution, that understands freedom, and can stand up against, and courageously stand up against that tyranny. And then when that happens, here in Manatee County, other schools started following suit. Other organizations started following suit.
It takes one brave person to lead.
Courage is contagious.
It is. That's exactly right.
And so thank you for your courage in stepping out. And now you find yourself on a podcast.
Wild.
and out there sharing the news that we need to make sure that we don't comply, that we've got to stand up and fight for our rights. Otherwise, they don't exist.
They'll continue to deteriorate. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Travis Preacher, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
The Eddie-torial podcast.
They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.